Hi, and welcome to Trust and Obey and our study of the book of Esther. I'm recording this on Monday, March 17th, 2025. And that means that last week, March 14th and 15th, on Thursday and Friday, Jews all over the world celebrated Purim. And there would be no Purim without Esther. And many of the Jews call her Hadassah. This book is historically true. It is verifiable by outside historians in terms of the things that were going on at this time. Takes place over 2,600 years ago in 483 BC. And this is the story of a most unlikely character, a Jewish orphan who becomes the queen of Persia. And the Persian Empire was arguably the largest empire ever in the history of man. And so let's get to it, because all the information is right here for us. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. So let's just stop there. Why did they say this is the Ahasuerus who reigned? Because at this time, in 43 BC, there were three people named Ahasuerus who had important positions. But this King Ahasuerus in the book of Esther is the one who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. So 127 provinces, what does that mean? So I'm going to give you a list of 19 countries today that would have fallen under the reign of the Persian Empire. The same footprint, but contemporary country names. Ready? Egypt, Bulgaria, Romania, Cyprus, Ethiopia, Kuwait, Iran, Georgia, Azerbaijan, India, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. Imagine today if one government controlled all 19 countries. That was the situation that this Ahasuerus was in charge of. So it says, in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the citadel, that in the third year of his reign, he made a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles, and the princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. So who throws a 6-month party for the government underneath him? Somebody who has a plan. And we go to outside historians like Herodotus to say, what was going on at this time? Why would King Ahasuerus decide to invest 6 months in a 180-day party? Well, he did have something in mind. He wanted to conquer Greece. And so he organized with his immediate princes groups of leaders from these provinces. So you heard the list of the countries. in those provinces were all kinds of different ethnic groups speaking different languages, some of them at war with one another. And so organizationally, this was very serious, because what Ahasuerus' plan was to get, let's just say, groups of 5 or 6 provinces up there at a time. He didn't invite the whole group at once for 6 months. He's filing them through in congenial groups. He's bringing them to a kind of festivity that they couldn't imagine in their wildest dreams. And he's saying, you are all going to be a part of this. And this is what we're going to do together. We are going to take over the Greece. And you're all going to share in that. But in order to share in that and be a part of this kind of power, you have to tell me what kind of resources you can provide to make that campaign against Greece successful. I need men, I need weaponry, I need ships. So he puts the arm on all of these leaders from these provinces, small groups at a time, and he records exactly what they say they can provide for him. And then he parties with them and drinks and feasts and just shows them splendor like they could never, ever imagine. And then he invites the next group until he gets all of the 127 provinces in, and he knows what size an army he can put together and how much of an armada he can put together to take over Greece. So that's what's going on hysterically. That's the context for this party. This is him saying, I have to absolutely bowl these people over with splendor and wealth and wisdom, and they're all going to want to be a part of this. So here's a map showing the Persian Empire in 483 BC. And here's an excavation done by archaeologists of the palace at Shushan. It was huge. Here's a model of just the main palace, not all the outside buildings and gardens and all of that, just the main palace. And here's artwork actually from the palace, done in colored tiles. These would be of Persian warriors. It says, and when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan, the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple on silver rods, and marble pillars. And the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household, that they should do according to each man's pleasure. So, what's going on here? After he does the 6-month party for all the leaders of all the countries, he had his politicians write a decree, which he signed, saying, here are the rules about drinking at these events. Drinking is not compulsory. You don't have to drink if you don't want to. But it's up to each person to do according to each man's pleasure. So he's saying, you don't have to drink, But if you want to drink like crazy, you're allowed to do that. That is all within the law. So he does the 180-day feast, and then he does a 7-day feast for the people in Shushan, because he's going to need a lot of cooperation from everyone in the capital to be able to wage this campaign. A winged bull. Here's a picture of a wine goblet, each one uniquely made, each one solid gold. Now, the 7-day party was outside in the garden, and this is one of the wall reliefs from the garden. So everything incredibly elaborate. If you think of the size of the empire, and all of these provinces are paying tribute to the king. So his treasuries are full, and he's engaging in unbelievable cruelty and unbelievable artwork. And right now he wants to take over Greece. And so he is showing his best side to everybody. Here's a rendering of this Shushan palace and grounds, fountains and gardens, and just unbelievable. On the 7th day, this is the last day of all of the feasting, when the heart of the king was merry with wine. Just imagine, he's been entertaining for 187 days. He commanded Mahuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs. Therefore, the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. So let's fill in historically the context of what's going on here. It's the last day of all this partying. It's the last day of King Ahasuerus having to be a great host to all these people to get their cooperation, so that he knows exactly, from the 127 provinces to all the people in Shushan, that he's got a uniform command, and that he's going to be successful in this campaign. And he's been drinking heavily throughout. And historians say, yes, he's the king of this empire, but basically he was a guy who liked to drink too much and was very much into chasing skirts. He just wanted women all the time. So now he's had all of this wine. It's the last day of the last event, and he's decided he wants to show off his queen. And so he sends his eunuchs to go get the queen, and he wants her to present her beauty wearing her royal crown. So normally a modest Persian woman would have a veil. She would cover her face. He doesn't want that. He wants her to show her face. He wants her to wear the crown. He wants her to show off. But there's one piece of information that we're missing. She is most likely in the 8th or 9th month of her pregnancy, carrying the king's son, who will be Artaxerxes, who will reign after the father. So now, imagine her. She knows they're all drunk. She knows that it's potentially not just dangerous, but could mean her death, to refuse the king and embarrass him in front of all of his guests. But she is also thinking, hey, I'm carrying his baby and I'm very close to delivery and I'm not feeling beautiful. I'm not looking beautiful. I don't want to go and parade with this big belly in front of all of these drunks. And on top of it, he wants me to not be veiled, and I'm just not going to do it. And so the king announces he's going to bring his beautiful queen, who's billed as the most beautiful woman in all of these provinces, and she refuses to come, which is unheard of. Women had very little control over their lives back then. And he was furious, and his anger burned within him, and he's been drinking a lot. So let's see what happens. It says, then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice. So these are like attorneys, or let's say senators. They are the princes of Persia, and they all want power, and they'd all like to be king. And so they take advantage of every situation that they can. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do to Queen Vashti, according to the law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs? And here's a picture of Queen Vashti. And answered before the king and the princess, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. And we've titled this slide, Never Let a Disaster Go to Waste. Now that's a contemporary Democrat call to arms, that anytime there's any kind of disaster, make sure you gain power from it, make sure you make money from it, make sure that you absolutely seize the opportunity and don't let it go to waste. So what becomes major but confined to the palace, now Memucan, the Schumer of past history, is going to say, you know what? We're going to blow this up to all 127 provinces. So he says, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. So remember, this reptilian individual who's a prince of Persia and would like to be a king of Persia is looking at a drunken king, Ahasuerus, whose pride has been bruised, who's been embarrassed, and who's been drinking for over a half year nonstop and not on his best. It's an opportunity to take advantage. He says, if it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. So this whole manipulation of Ahasuerus by these wise men that are around him, these princes of Persia, is actually all happening by the hand of God, including Vashti being late in her pregnancy, refusing to come and be leered at by all of these drunken guests. And if she had not done that, there would not be the opportunity for Esther to become queen. So how does that apply to today? We see governments in our past history and in contemporary history constantly being manipulated by evil men who want power and want to rule over others. In this case, it's women, but later it's going to be all of the Jewish people. And we see God's providential hand working against this kind of evil. So here's a picture. It's titled Carpe Diem. It is showing Memucan. All of these men, all been drinking, all of them upset. King Ahasuerus is over there in his throne, and he has some sense that things are getting out of control and maybe it's not going to be great for him, but his pride is injured, and along with the alcohol, he's going for the whole thing. And the reply pleased the king and the princess, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be master of his own house and speak in the language of his own people. And this will all be enforced by these guys depicted in palace art, fierce Persian archer warriors. More Persian art, elaborate and beautiful. Now we're going to have a word of prayer, and along with this theme of men in power and God's providential hand over it, our historians are rewriting the history of the founding of our country and depicting the founders as a bunch of white, racist patriarchs, and that most of them were not Christian, they were deists, and it's absolutely not true. So God's providential hand was over George Washington throughout his whole life. All kinds of historical verification of this, not the least of which is that Washington kept his own personal prayer journal for his entire life and composed prayers in that journal. And this is one of them. And listen to his prayer, listen to his thoughts, and determine for yourself if this is somebody who is not a Christian and just a deist. A deist is someone who believes that God created the world and then he walked away from it. He basically said, okay, this is good enough. Let's see what you make of it. You don't have to pray to me. I'm not coming back. I'm giving you something fantastic. Let's see what you make of it. That's absolutely untrue. And you be the judge based on just one of Washington's prayers. We're going to read many in this study. O most glorious God in Jesus Christ, my merciful and loving Father, I acknowledge and confess my guilt in the weak and imperfect performance of the duties of this day. I have called on thee for pardon and forgiveness of sins, but so coldly and carelessly that my prayers have become my sin and stand in need of pardon. I have heard thy holy word, but with such deadness of spirit that I have been an unprofitable and forgetful hearer. So that, O Lord, though I have done thy work, yet it have been so negligently that I may rather expect a curse than a blessing from thee. O God, who art rich in mercy and plenteous in redemption, mark not, I beseech thee, what I have done amiss. Remember that I am but dust, and remit my transgressions, negligences, and ignorances, and cover them all with the absolute obedience of thy dear Son, that those sacrifices which I have offered may be accepted by thee in and for the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, offered upon the cross for me. For his sake, ease me of the burden of my sin, and give me grace that by the call of the gospel I may rise from the slumber of sin into the newness of life. Let me live according to those holy rules which thou hast this day prescribed in thy holy word. Make me to know what is acceptable in thy holy word. Make me to know what is acceptable in thy sight, and therein to delight. Open the eyes of my understanding, and help me thoroughly to examine myself concerning my knowledge, faith, and repentance. Increase my faith and direct me to the true object, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. Bless, O Lord, all the people of this land, from the highest to the lowest, particularly those whom thou hast appointed to rule over us in church and state. Continue thy goodness to me this night. These weak petitions I humbly implore thee to hear, accept, and answer for the sake of thy dear Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Thank you for joining us for the study of the first chapter of Esther. God bless you.